In the small town of Millfield, Texas, Dr. Eleanor Hayes led the historical restoration team at the County Museum. The summer of 2025 had brought an unexpected donation: the Thornton estate, a once prominent family whose 1883 farmhouse stood abandoned on the outskirts of town for decades. As the team catalogued the home's artifacts, custodian Roy Daniels discovered a portrait in the attic, wrapped in yellowed newspaper and canvas. "Dr. Hayes, you might want to see this," Roy called down the narrow staircase, his voice echoing through the empty house. Eleanor climbed the creaking stairs, her footsteps stirring dust that danced in the afternoon sunlight, streaming through a small window. The attic was stifling in the July heat, the temperature nearing 100 degrees despite their industrial fans. "Found it behind that false wall," Roy explained, pointing to a section of paneling he'd removed. "Looks important." Dussault's the portrait was large, nearly 4 feet tall, showing the Thornton family posed in front of their farmhouse. The oil painting depicted Thomas Thornton, his wife Margaret, and their 3 children, all dressed in their Sunday best. The detail was remarkable for a rural Texas portrait from 1883, with each face rendered with photographic precision. "This is museum quality," Eleanor whispered, carefully examining the canvas. "Look at the detail in the background. You can even see into the windows of the house." As Eleanor leaned closer to examine the window behind the family, she noticed something unusual. Unlike the static nature of the rest of the painting, the window appeared to have depth, as if one could look through it into the house itself. "Roy, do you see that?" she asked, pointing to the small window in the painted farmhouse. Roy squinted. "Looks like... Is that a figure inside?" Eleanor took out her phone and opened the camera app, zooming in on the window. As the digital image magnified, her screen suddenly froze, displaying only a pixelated mess of colors. "That's weird," she muttered, restarting her phone. Later that evening, after carefully transporting the portrait to the museum's conservation room, Eleanor and her assistant Mia Chen began the documentation process. Mia set up the digital scanning equipment while Eleanor prepared her notes. "Let's get a high-resolution image before we start any cleaning," Eleanor said. Mia positioned the camera and began the scan. The computer screen displayed the portrait in stunning detail, allowing them to examine every brushstroke. When Mia zoomed in on the farmhouse window, the computer suddenly shut down. "What happened?" Eleanor asked. "I don't know," Mia replied, rebooting the system. "Maybe a power surge?" They tried again with the same result. Every attempt to digitally magnify the window in the portrait caused their equipment to malfunction. "This is impossible," Mia said, examining the computer. "There's nothing wrong with our equipment." Eleanor felt a chill despite the room's warmth. "Maybe we should continue tomorrow," she suggested, unable to shake the feeling that they were being watched. That night, Eleanor dreamed of the farmhouse. In her dream, she stood before the actual window depicted in the portrait, looking inside. A face appeared in the darkness, pale with hollow eyes that seemed to recognize her. She woke with a start, her heart racing. The portrait had only been in their possession for 1 day, but already Eleanor sensed there was something deeply wrong with it, something that extended beyond ordinary explanation. Professor James Harlow arrived from Austin the following morning. An art historian specializing in 19th-century American portraiture, James had been Eleanor's colleague during her doctoral studies. His expertise would be invaluable in authenticating and contextualizing the Thornton portrait. "You weren't exaggerating about the quality," James said, examining the portrait under special lighting. "This level of detail is extraordinary for a frontier artist." "The signature in the corner says H. Wells," Eleanor pointed out. "I've been researching, but can't find any Texas painter by that name from the period." James frowned. "Neither have I, and I thought I knew every significant artist from this region." They worked methodically, photographing the portrait from various angles and taking paint samples from the edges for analysis. Each time they attempted to capture the window detail digitally, their equipment failed. "This is beyond frustrating," James said, after their third camera malfunctioned. "Let's try the microscope instead." They positioned the portrait under the museum's digital microscope. James adjusted the focus, bringing the window into view. As the image sharpened, both researchers gasped. Through the window, they could make out a dimly lit room with period-appropriate furniture, details impossible to see with the naked eye. "That's unusual," James whispered. The artist painted a fully realized interior. As they watched, a shadow moved across the room. "Did you see that?" Eleanor asked, her voice tense. Before James could answer, the microscope's display went black. Simultaneously, the lights in the conservation room flickered and died. "Perfect timing," James muttered, as emergency lighting bathed the room in a soft glow. The museum's security guard, Hector Ramirez, appeared at the door. "Everything okay in here? Power's out in the whole building." "We're fine," Eleanor assured him. "Probably just overloaded a circuit." After Hector left, James leaned closer to examine the portrait with a magnifying glass. "Elle, come look at this." Through the glass, the window now appeared completely dark, as if someone had drawn curtains across it. "That's impossible," Eleanor said. "It wasn't like that before." Later that afternoon, as they were preparing to lock the portrait in the museum's secure storage, James suddenly stumbled, grabbing the table for support. "James? What's wrong?" Eleanor asked, alarmed by his sudden pallor. "Dizzy spell," he said, his voice unsteady. "I feel cold." Eleanor helped him to a chair. His skin was ice-cold despite the room's comfortable temperature. "Should I call an ambulance?" "No," he said firmly. "I'm fine now, just need some water." That night, James called Eleanor from his hotel room. "Elle, something strange is happening. I can't stop thinking about the portrait." "What do you mean?" "I keep seeing that window when I close my eyes, and I think I saw someone in my bathroom mirror, just for a second." "You're overtired," Eleanor said, trying to sound reassuring despite her own unease. "Get some sleep." "Maybe," James replied, not sounding convinced. "Did you notice the date on the newspaper wrapping the portrait? April 15th, 1883. I looked it up. That's the day Thomas Thornton's youngest daughter disappeared." The line went silent. "James, you there?" When he spoke again, his voice was different, distant and strained. "Someone's outside my door, Elle. I have to go." The call ended abruptly. Eleanor immediately tried calling back, but there was no answer. Eleanor arrived early at the museum the next morning, worry gnawing at her. James hadn't answered any of her calls or texts since their conversation had ended so abruptly. When she reached the conservation room, she found him already there, hunched over a laptop. "James, why didn't you answer my calls? I was worried sick." He looked up, his eyes bloodshot and underlined by dark circles. "Sorry, battery died. Been here since dawn." Eleanor noticed his hands trembling slightly as he typed. "What are you working on?" "I ran the portrait through specialized imaging software last night," he explained, his voice hoarse. "Look at what it found." On his screen was an enhanced version of the portrait, processed to reveal underlying layers of paint. The farmhouse window, previously showing just hints of an interior, now displayed a clear image. A young girl, perhaps 8 years old, standing in a darkened room. Her face was partially obscured, but her eyes were visible and appeared to be looking directly at the viewer. "That's Emma Thornton," James said. "The daughter who went missing." Eleanor felt her skin prickle. "How can you be sure?" "I found this in the county archives." He pulled up a newspaper clipping with a grainy photograph of the Thornton family. The youngest child was indeed a small girl with the same features as the figure in the window. "According to the reports, she vanished without a trace," James continued. "They searched for weeks. Some thought she'd been kidnapped, others that she'd gotten lost in the woods. Her body was never found." Eleanor studied the digital image. "This doesn't make sense. Why would the artist paint her in the window after she disappeared?" "Maybe he didn't," James said quietly. "The spectral analysis shows this figure was painted underneath the window, then painted over, like someone tried to hide her." Their conversation was interrupted by Mia, who burst into the room looking agitated. "You need to see this," she said, thrusting her tablet toward them. "I was reviewing the security footage from yesterday, and there's something wrong with the cameras in this room." The footage showed Eleanor and James working at the table with the portrait. At exactly 3:17 p.m., the time of their power outage, the video distorted. For 3 seconds, the image of the portrait seemed to expand, filling the screen with a pattern of shifting pixels. When the video normalized, a dark figure appeared to be standing behind James, visible for just 1 frame before vanishing. "That can't be real," Eleanor whispered. "I checked all the cameras," Mia said. "Every one of them showed the same anomaly at exactly the same time." James rubbed his eyes. "I need coffee. Strong coffee." While James went to find caffeine, Eleanor examined the portrait again. The window now appeared different, darker, with the curtains partially drawn, revealing just a sliver of the room beyond. "It's changing," she murmured to herself. When James didn't return after 15 minutes, Eleanor went looking for him. She found him in the museum's bathroom, splashing water on his face. "You okay?" she asked, concerned by his ashen complexion. "No," he admitted. "I keep seeing her, the girl in the window. Last night in my hotel room I saw her reflection in the mirror. This morning I saw her in a puddle on the sidewalk." He gripped the sink tightly. "I think I'm losing my mind, Elle." "You're exhausted, and we're both suggestible right now," Eleanor said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Let's take a break from the portrait, maybe consult with someone else." James nodded weakly. "There's a digital imaging expert at UT Austin, Dr. Rivera. She might be able to help us understand what's happening with our equipment." As they left the bathroom, James suddenly stumbled, clutching his head. "James, she's calling me," he whispered, his eyes unfocused. "She wants to be found." By evening, Dr. Sofia Rivera had arrived from Austin with specialized equipment. A forensic digital imaging expert, she'd worked with law enforcement agencies across the country, using technology to reveal hidden details in photographs and paintings. "This interference pattern is fascinating," she said, examining the corrupted files from their previous attempts. "I've never seen anything quite like it." They set up her equipment in the conservation room. Unlike their previous attempts, Sophia used a specialized camera that captured multiple spectral bands beyond visible light. "If there's anything unusual about the pigments or underpainting, this will find it," she explained. As the scanning began, the portrait was displayed on her laptop in unprecedented detail. Layer by layer, the software peeled back the painting's secrets. When they reached the window, Sophia zoomed in without any technical difficulties. "That's strange," Eleanor said. "Our equipment kept failing at this point." "Different technology," Sophia suggested, though she looked puzzled. "Let's enhance this section." The window came into sharp focus. Behind the glass was a child's bedroom with a small bed, a rocking horse, and a wooden chest. The little girl was there, standing by the bed, her face now clearly visible. She appeared to be looking directly at them, one hand slightly raised as if in greeting or warning. "This is incredible detail," Sophia murmured. "It's almost like a photograph within the painting." As they watched, the image on the screen began to change. The girl's expression shifted from neutral to distressed. Her mouth opened as if crying out. "That's not possible," Sophia said, her professional composure cracking. "This is a static image. It can't change." The room's lights flickered. On screen, the girl pressed her hands against the window, her features contorting in terror. "Turn it off," James said sharply. "Turn it off now." Sophia hit the power button, but the laptop continued to display the image. The girl's face filled the screen, her eyes wide with fear, her mouth forming words they couldn't hear. Then, suddenly, the laptop shut down. The lights stabilized. The room fell silent except for their rapid breathing. "What the hell was that?" Sophia demanded. Before anyone could answer, James collapsed, his body convulsing on the floor. "Call an ambulance!" Eleanor shouted to Mia, who had been observing from the doorway. James was rushed to Millfield General Hospital, where doctors diagnosed him with an unexplained seizure. Eleanor and Sophia waited anxiously in the corridor outside his room. "I've never seen anything like that," Sophia admitted. "The way the image changed, it violated every principle of digital imaging I know." "Do you think it could be some kind of elaborate hoax?" Eleanor asked. "Maybe someone tampered with the portrait?" Sophia shook her head. "No hoax could affect multiple independent systems the same way. Whatever this is, it's beyond conventional explanation." When they were finally allowed to see James, they found him awake but disoriented. The attending physician, Dr. Martinez, pulled Eleanor aside. "We're running more tests, but physically, everything looks normal," she explained. "However, his psychological state is concerning. He keeps talking about a girl trapped in a painting." "That's related to our research," Eleanor said. "We've been studying an old portrait." Dr. Martinez frowned. "He's not just talking about it. He's insisting she's trying to communicate with him, that she needs help. We've sedated him for now, but I'm recommending a psychiatric evaluation." Later that night, alone in her apartment, Eleanor reviewed their findings on her personal laptop. She couldn't stop thinking about the girl in the window, Emma Thornton, who disappeared without a trace in 1883. As she scrolled through the images they'd managed to capture, she noticed something they'd missed: a small notebook or diary, visible on the bed behind Emma. Zooming in carefully, she could just make out writing on its open pages. The sudden ring of her phone made her jump. It was Mia. "Dr. Hayes, something's happening at the museum. The motion sensors in the conservation room keep triggering, but security can't find anyone." "I'm on my way," Eleanor said, suddenly certain that whatever was happening, it was far from over. Eleanor arrived at the museum to find Hector Ramirez, the night security guard, visibly shaken. The motion sensors in the conservation room had activated 6 times in the past hour, yet security footage showed no one entering or leaving. "I don't scare easy, Dr. Hayes," Hector said, his voice low as they walked toward the conservation room. "But something ain't right tonight. The temperature keeps dropping in there, even though the thermostat reads normal." Inside the room, Eleanor's breath clouded in front of her face. The portrait sat on its easel, seemingly unchanged, yet the air around it felt charged, as if before a lightning storm. "Has anyone else been here?" she asked, approaching the painting cautiously. "Just me, checking the alarms and—" Hector hesitated. "I know this sounds crazy, but I thought I heard a child crying." Eleanor examined the portrait. In the painted window, the curtains were now fully open, revealing Emma's room in detail. The girl herself was no longer visible. "Where did she go?" Eleanor whispered, leaning closer. Her phone rang, startling them both. It was Sophia Rivera. "Eleanor, I've been analyzing the data from today," Sophia said without preamble. "There's something you need to know." The spectral imaging picked up text hidden in the painting, writing too small to see with the naked eye. "What kind of writing?" "It looks like diary entries, painted microscopically around the window frame. I've only deciphered parts, but it appears to be Emma Thornton's diary. And Eleanor, according to these fragments, she didn't just disappear." Eleanor felt her skin grow cold. "What do you mean?" "The text suggests she was hidden, sealed into a space inside the house. There's a reference to Father's new wall, and no one can hear me scream." The implication struck Eleanor like a physical blow. "Are you saying she was entombed in the house, alive?" "I can't be certain," but Sophia's voice cut off as the call dropped. Eleanor tried calling back, but there was no signal. Beside her, Hector suddenly stiffened. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. At first, Eleanor heard nothing. Then faintly, the sound of a child sobbing echoed through the room. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Jesus," Hector muttered, crossing himself. Eleanor approached the portrait again. Something had changed. The girl, Emma, was now visible in the window once more. Her face was pressed against the glass, tears streaming down her cheeks. As Eleanor watched, Emma's lips moved, forming words Eleanor couldn't hear. "She's trying to tell us something," Eleanor said. On impulse, she took out her phone and opened a voice recording app. The moment she pressed record, the temperature in the room plummeted further. The recording showed sound waves forming, though Eleanor heard nothing. When she played it back, a child's voice emerged from the static. "Behind the wall. Help me. He put me here. Can't breathe." Hector backed toward the door. "This isn't right, Dr. Hayes. We need to leave. Now." But Eleanor couldn't tear herself away from the portrait. "Emma, can you hear me?" The lights flickered violently. On the recording, the child's voice continued, "The farmhouse, north bedroom. He's coming." Suddenly, all the lights in the room exploded simultaneously, plunging them into darkness. Hector yelled in alarm. In the beam of Eleanor's phone flashlight, she saw the portrait vibrating on its easel. "Run!" Hector shouted, grabbing her arm. They fled the conservation room, slamming the door behind them. Through the glass panel, Eleanor saw the portrait fall to the floor with a crash. "We need to go to the farmhouse," Eleanor said, her voice shaking. "The Thornton farmhouse, tonight." Hector stared at her in disbelief. "Are you crazy? After what just happened?" "She's trying to tell us something. Something happened in that house. Something terrible. If there's any chance her remains are still there." "This is a job for the police," Hector insisted. "And tell them what? That a painting told us a girl who disappeared 142 years ago is sealed in a wall. They'll think we're insane." Eleanor's phone rang again, Sophia calling back. "Eleanor, I've deciphered more text," she said urgently. According to these fragments, Emma's father caught her with her diary, writing about seeing him with another woman. The next entry is chaotic. She describes him building a false wall in her bedroom while she slept, sealing her inside. The artist knew, Eleanor realized. H. Wells, whoever painted this, knew what happened and hid the truth in the portrait itself. After convincing a reluctant Hector to accompany her, Eleanor drove to the abandoned Thornton farmhouse at the edge of town. The dilapidated structure loomed against the night sky, its windows dark and empty, like dead eyes. "I still think this is a bad idea," Hector said as they approached the porch, his flashlight beam dancing nervously across the weathered boards. Inside, the house was a shell of its former self, stripped of most furnishings during the museum's initial cataloguing. They made their way upstairs, where 3 bedrooms branched off a narrow hallway. "The north bedroom would be this one," Eleanor said, pointing to a door at the end of the corridor. The room was small, with peeling wallpaper and a single window, the same window depicted in the portrait. Eleanor examined the walls carefully, tapping to detect hollow spaces. "Here," she said finally, "near the corner farthest from the door. This section sounds different." Hector reluctantly helped her pry away the rotting wooden panels. Behind them was a second wall of crude brick and mortar. "My God," he whispered, "you don't think—" Eleanor's phone rang once more. This time it was the hospital. "Dr. Hayes," a nurse said, "you're listed as James Harlowe's emergency contact. He's gone missing. Somehow he left the hospital without anyone seeing him." "When?" Eleanor asked, suddenly afraid. "About an hour ago. We've alerted security, but—" A floorboard creaked behind them. Eleanor and Hector turned to find James standing in the doorway, his hospital gown exchanged for street clothes, his eyes unnaturally bright in the beam of their flashlights. "I knew you'd come," he said, his voice oddly flat. "She told me you would." "James, what are you doing here?" Eleanor asked, taking a cautious step toward her colleague. "You should be in the hospital." James smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Emma showed me the way. She's been showing me things, terrible things that happened in this house." Hector moved protectively closer to Eleanor. "Dr. Harlowe, you're not well. Let us take you back to the hospital." James ignored him, his gaze fixed on the partially exposed brick wall. "She's there, behind that wall, has been for 142 years. He approached, running his fingers over the aged mortar. "Her father built this in a single night. She woke up sealed inside. "James, how could you possibly know that?" Eleanor asked. "Because she showed me." He tapped his temple. "In here." "She can't rest until she's found." Eleanor exchanged a worried glance with Hector. James's behavior was alarming, but they had found exactly what he described, a hidden wall that shouldn't exist. "We need tools to break through this," Eleanor said, trying to remain practical despite the surreal situation. "There's a toolbox in my truck," Hector offered. "I'll go get it." "Hurry," James urged, his voice suddenly desperate. "She's waited so long." After Hector left, Eleanor studied James more carefully. His skin was pale and clammy, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. "James, what happened at the hospital? How did you know to come here?" "I saw her room through the window," he replied, his eyes never leaving the brick wall. "In the portrait. The view kept changing, showing me details. I recognized this house from the catalogue photos. I had to come." "And the hospital staff just let you walk out?" James smiled that strange, empty smile again. "No one saw me. It was like I wasn't fully there." Eleanor's phone chimed with a text from Sophia. More text decoded. H. Wells was Harriet Wells, the Thornton children's governess. She suspected Thomas Thornton killed Emma but couldn't prove it. Painted portrait 1 year after disappearance, hiding evidence in plain sight. Hector returned with a sledgehammer and crowbar. "Stand back," he warned, positioning the sledgehammer. The first blow sent cracked spider webbing through the ancient mortar. The second dislodged several bricks. As they fell away, a noxious odor escaped from the cavity, the unmistakable, musty scent of a long-sealed space. James began to tremble violently. "She's here! She's here!" he repeated, his voice rising hysterically. Working carefully, Hector and Eleanor widened the opening. Their flashlight beams penetrated the darkness beyond, revealing a small space, no more than 3 feet wide and 6 feet deep, between the false wall and the exterior wall of the house. And there, huddled in the corner, were the remains of a small human figure. "Oh my God," Eleanor whispered. The skeleton was that of a child, still dressed in the tattered remnants of a nightgown. Clutched in its bony fingers was a small leather-bound book. A diary. Scratches covered the inside of the brick wall where the child had desperately tried to claw her way out. James collapsed to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "She was just a little girl, just a little girl." Eleanor fought back her own tears. "We need to call the police now. This is a crime scene." Hector nodded grimly, already dialing 911 on his phone. As they waited for authorities to arrive, Eleanor gently examined the diary without disturbing the remains. Many pages were illegible due to water damage and time, but some entries remained clear enough to read. April 10th, 1883. Saw father with Mrs. Kendrick again today. Mother doesn't know. Should I tell her? April 14th. Father caught me writing in my diary. He was so angry, said terrible things. I'm scared. The final entry, dated April 15th, was a desperate scrawl. He's building something outside my room while I sleep. The scraping woke me. He won't answer when I call. The noise is getting closer. I'm afraid to... The entry ended mid-sentence. Eleanor closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the tragedy they'd uncovered. A child murdered by her father. Her fate, hidden for nearly a century and a half, revealed only through the haunting portrait of a governess who suspected the truth but could not prove it. When the police arrived, they secured the scene with surprising efficiency, respecting the historical and forensic significance of their discovery. Detective Marcus Washington interviewed them separately, his initial skepticism giving way to grim acceptance as the evidence mounted. "You realize how this sounds," he told Eleanor after she explained about the portrait. "A painting leading you to a 142-year-old crime scene?" "I know," she acknowledged, "but the facts remain. Emma Thornton disappeared in 1883, and we've found human remains consistent with a child of her age and era sealed in a hidden space that shouldn't exist, along with a diary identifying her father as the killer," Detective Washington added. That's solid evidence, regardless of how you found it. As forensic technicians carefully excavated the sealed space, Eleanor checked on James, who sat wrapped in a shock blanket in an ambulance. "How are you feeling?" she asked gently. "Better," he said, his voice stronger than before, clearer, like something that was pressing on my mind has lifted. He looked toward the house. "She just wanted to be found, El, to have someone know what happened to her. And now we do," Eleanor said, squeezing his hand. As dawn broke over the farmhouse, casting long shadows across the overgrown yard, Eleanor couldn't help but wonder about the portrait that had led them here, and the governess who had encoded the truth within it, hoping that someday someone would see what she had seen. 3 days later, the portrait of the Thornton family had been moved to a secure room at the university's forensic lab. Following their discovery at the farmhouse, the painting had become evidence in what the media was calling the 19th century cold case. Late preliminary forensic analysis had confirmed the remains found in the sealed wall were indeed those of a female child, approximately 8 years old. Dental records were being compared with medical reports from the county archives, but everyone involved was confident they had found Emma Thornton. Dr. Rivera had assembled a team of imaging specialists to analyze every millimeter of the portrait. Under their careful scrutiny, Harriet Wells's hidden message was gradually being revealed, a testimony encoded in microscopic text and symbolic imagery, visible only through advanced technology. "It's brilliant, really," Sophia explained to Eleanor and James as they gathered in the lab. "Wells knew she couldn't accuse Thomas Thornton directly. He was a powerful man in the community. So she created this portrait as both a memorial and an accusation." On the main screen, enhanced images showed the previously invisible text surrounding the window frame, Harriet's account of the events leading to Emma's disappearance. "According to these passages, Harriet suspected Thomas almost immediately," Sophia continued. "Emma had confided in her about seeing her father with another woman. The day after Emma disappeared, Harriet noticed the new wall in her bedroom. But why didn't she go to the authorities?" Eleanor asked. "She tried," James said, pointing to another section of decoded text. "Look here, she writes about the sheriff dismissing her concerns, saying Thomas Thornton was too respectable to be involved in his daughter's disappearance." Eleanor shook her head in disgust, so she turned to art instead. "As both evidence and insurance," Sophia added. "She wrote here that she gave the portrait to the Thorntons as a gift, knowing Thomas wouldn't recognize what she'd hidden within it. But she made sure the window in the painting showed Emma's actual room, with subtle clues about the false wall." James, who had been surprisingly stable since their discovery at the farmhouse, studied the portrait thoughtfully. She couldn't have known about digital imaging or spectral analysis. She was hoping someone might physically investigate the house someday, which no one did until now, Eleanor said. "The house remained in the Thornton family for generations, then stood abandoned for decades." Their conversation was interrupted by Detective Washington, who entered carrying a thick folder. "Thought you all might want to hear this," he said. "We've been digging through county records from the 1880s. Thomas Thornton died in 1889, apparent suicide by hanging. The interesting part is the timing. It happened one day after Harriet Wells' portrait was publicly displayed at a town gathering." "He saw it," Eleanor realized. "Maybe he recognized what she'd done, that she'd created evidence against him." "There's more," Washington continued. "Margaret Thornton, Emma's mother, wrote in her diary that Thomas became obsessed with the portrait after that event, claiming he could see Emma moving in the window. He tried to destroy it, but Margaret stopped him. The portrait affected him the same way it affected us," James said quietly, "but he knew what he'd done. The guilt must have been unbearable." "And after his death?" Sophia asked. "The portrait was placed in storage by Margaret, who died in 1901. Their surviving children eventually moved away, leaving caretakers to maintain the property. The house passed through several owners until it was abandoned in the 1970s. As they absorbed this information, a technician approached with new images from the portrait. "Dr. Rivera, we found something else," she said. "There appears to be a hidden signature beneath the visible one." On screen, the enhanced image showed that beneath H. Wells was another name, Emma Thornton. "She let Emma sign it," Eleanor whispered, "before she disappeared." "That makes this not just evidence," Sophia said, "but a collaboration between victim and witness. Harriet gave Emma a voice that would eventually be heard, even if it took 142 years. That evening, as Eleanor prepared the formal acquisition documents for the portrait, which would eventually be displayed in the museum with a full account of its dark history, she received a call from the medical examiner's office. "Dr. Hayes, we've completed the preliminary examination of the remains," Dr. Freeman said. "I thought you should know. We found graphite stains on the right-hand finger bones, consistent with someone who wrote or drew frequently." "She had her diary with her," Eleanor recalled. "Yes, but there's more. We found pencil marks on the interior brick surface, not just scratch marks, but writing and small drawings. She was documenting her experience until the end." Eleanor closed her eyes, imagining Emma's final days, alone, afraid, but still trying to record her story, not knowing if anyone would ever find it. "There's one more thing," Dr. Freeman added. "Among the drawings on the brick, there was a portrait. A small, crude sketch, but recognizable as Harriet Wells." After the call ended, Eleanor sat in silence, contemplating the bond between the young girl and her governess, a connection strong enough to transcend death and time. Harriet had preserved Emma's story within her art, and Emma, in her final days, had done the same for Harriet, two witnesses separated by a wall, yet somehow still connected. 1 week after the discovery at the farmhouse, the Millfield Historical Society held an emergency meeting to discuss the portrait and its implications. The room was packed with townsfolk, reporters, and academics, all drawn by the now national story of Emma Thornton's fate. Eleanor, James, and Sophia sat at the front, prepared to present their findings. The portrait itself remained at the forensic lab, but high-resolution prints were displayed around the room, showing both the painting as it appeared to the naked eye and the hidden elements revealed through technology. Mayor Caroline Reeves opened the session. "This discovery has put Millfield on the map in ways we never expected. While the circumstances are tragic, the historical significance cannot be overstated." Eleanor took the podium first. "What we've uncovered is not just a crime, but a remarkable act of documentation and witness. Harriet Wells created this portrait as testimony, evidence that would outlive her and eventually bring justice for Emma." As she detailed their investigation, Eleanor noticed a woman in her 70s watching intently from the second row. When the presentation concluded and questions began, the woman raised her hand. "My name is Martha Kendrick," she said, her voice quavering slightly. "My great-grandmother was Sarah Kendrick, the woman mentioned in Emma's diary." A hush fell over the room. "Family stories passed down suggest that Thomas Thornton and my great-grandmother were indeed involved," Martha continued. "After Emma disappeared, Sarah broke off the relationship. She always believed Thomas was responsible, but could never prove it." "Did Sarah ever speak with Harriet Wells?" James asked. "According to my grandmother, they met secretly several times after Emma vanished. Sarah provided Harriet with details about Thomas's movements on the night Emma disappeared," Martha explained. "Sarah noticed dirt under his fingernails and mortar on his clothes the next morning, but was too afraid to come forward publicly." "So there was a conspiracy of silence," Eleanor said, "but also a conspiracy of witness." "Yes," Martha nodded. "Sarah kept a journal that mentioned H's portrait will speak when we cannot. We never understood the reference until now." After the meeting, Eleanor, James, and Sophia invited Martha to view their additional findings in a private room at the museum. There, they showed her the microscopic text they'd discovered within the portrait's brushstrokes. "Harriet mentioned your great-grandmother here," Sophia said, pointing to a section on their enhanced images. "She writes that SK provided confirmation of my worst fears. She saw the lime and trowel in his workshop, noted their absence after that night." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "All these years, our family carried this burden of knowledge without proof. Sarah died believing she was partially responsible for Emma's death." "She wasn't," James assured her. "From what we can tell, Thomas had planned this in advance. Emma seeing him with Sarah was just the trigger." As the investigation continued, more descendants of Millfield's original families came forward with stories, letters and diaries that filled in the historical context around the Thornton tragedy. A more complete picture emerged of a town divided by wealth and influence, where Thomas Thornton's position had effectively silenced accusations against him. 2 weeks after the farmhouse discovery, Detective Washington requested a meeting with Eleanor and her team. "We've completed the forensic examination of the remains and the diary," he informed them. "The DNA analysis confirms the skeleton is related to living Thornton descendants. The cause of death appears to be dehydration and suffocation." Eleanor winced at the thought of Emma's slow, terrifying death. "There's something else," Washington continued. "The fingerprint analysis on the portrait frame revealed partial prints matching those found on the diary. Harriet Wells touched both objects." "Suggesting she retrieved the diary from the scene?" Sophia asked. "That's our theory," Washington confirmed. "Based on the decoded text in the portrait, we believe Harriet somehow gained access to Emma's room after her disappearance, discovered the false wall, and recovered the diary through a small gap, perhaps where the bricks met the ceiling." "But she couldn't save Emma," Eleanor said softly. "No, by then it was likely too late. But she preserved the evidence and created a testimony that would eventually lead to discovery. The prosecutor's office is officially closing the case, listing Thomas Thornton as Emma's murderer." That evening, the team gathered in the conservation room where their journey had begun. The portrait had been returned from the forensic lab and sat on its easel, now accompanied by didactic panels explaining its significance. "It's strange," James remarked, studying the painting. "It looks so ordinary now. No equipment malfunctions, no mysterious figures in the window." Eleanor approached the portrait carefully. The window that had once shown a glimpse of Emma's room now appeared as it should, a simple, painted representation of glass reflecting the Texas sky. "Whatever presence was here has moved on," she said. "Emma's been found. Her story's been told." Sophia nodded in agreement. The portrait served its purpose. Harriet Wells created a kind of time capsule, evidence preserved until technology and circumstance allowed it to be understood. As they prepared to leave, Martha Kendrick arrived with a small wooden box. "I found this in my family's storage," she explained, opening it to reveal a sepia photograph of a young woman in Victorian dress. "We believe this is Harriet Wells. There's an inscription on the back." Eleanor turned the photograph over carefully. In faded ink were the words, "To Sarah, who helped me bear witness when others would not. The truth endures longer than silence." Harriet Wells, 1884. She should be beside the portrait, Eleanor decided. The artist revealed at last. The museum director agreed, and a special exhibition was planned titled "Bearing Witness, the Thornton Family Portrait and the Art of Evidence." The exhibition would feature the portrait, Harriet's photograph, Emma's recovered diary, and the historical context of the case. On the exhibition's opening night, visitors filled the museum, moving slowly past the displays that chronicled both a tragedy and its long-delayed resolution. Eleanor overheard countless conversations expressing wonder at Harriet's foresight and Emma's courage in documenting her own imprisonment. As the crowd thinned near closing time, Eleanor found herself alone with the portrait. She studied the window, that had once revealed so much, wondering at the forces that had allowed a 19th century painting to communicate across time. "She's at peace now," James said, joining her. "Both of them are." Eleanor nodded. "I've been thinking about what Harriet accomplished. She couldn't save Emma, but she ensured she wouldn't be forgotten, that the truth would eventually come out." "A historian's highest purpose," James agreed, "preserving the truth for future generations." As they turned to leave, Eleanor caught a glimpse of movement reflected in the portrait's glass, not within the painting itself, but in its protective covering. For an instant she thought she saw two figures, a woman and a child, standing together, watching. She blinked, and they were gone. 1 month after the exhibition opened, Eleanor received a call from Dr. Rivera. "We've completed the final analysis of all the digital anomalies associated with the portrait," Sophia explained. "I think you'll find the results fascinating." That afternoon, Eleanor and James met Sophia at her university lab in Austin. Multiple screens displayed data from their equipment malfunctions, security camera glitches, and corrupted files. "At first, we assumed these were random technical failures," Sophia began. "But when we analyzed the pattern of disruptions, we found something extraordinary." She pulled up a composite image assembled from the corrupted data fragments. "These aren't just glitches, they're data. When properly sequenced and rendered, they form images." On the main screen appeared a series of blurry but recognizable scenes, the interior of Emma's bedroom from various angles, Thomas Thornton building the false wall, Emma writing in her diary by candlelight within the sealed space. "These are memories," Sophia said quietly, "impressions somehow encoded into the electromagnetic field surrounding the portrait." "That's impossible," James said, though his voice lacked conviction after everything they'd witnessed. "By conventional science, yes," Sophia agreed. "But consider this. Oil paints contain metal pigments that can hold electrical charges. Canvas can act as a capacitor. Under certain conditions, could a highly charged emotional event somehow imprint itself into these materials? Like a recording medium," Eleanor suggested, remembering how their equipment had captured Emma's voice. "Exactly. We're theorizing that Harriet Wells didn't just paint a portrait. She inadvertently created a storage device that preserved emotional and sensory data from 1883. "Mesum, but why did it only activate now, after 142 years?" James asked. "That's where it gets even stranger," Sophia replied. "The digital interference began precisely when you first photographed the window. Our theory is that the interaction between modern digital technology and whatever was stored in the painting created a kind of bridge." Eleanor considered this. "So by trying to digitize the portrait, you provided a new medium for the stored information to express itself," Sophia finished. "Digital cameras, computers, security systems all became conduits." The implications were staggering. If true, it suggested that other artifacts might contain similar imprints, undetected for centuries because the technology to access them hadn't existed. "We've prepared a paper for the Journal of Anomalous Phenomena," Sophia continued. "With your permission, we'd like to include your experiences as primary sources." "Of course," Eleanor agreed, "though I doubt mainstream academia will accept your theory." "Perhaps not immediately," Sophia acknowledged, "but the evidence is compelling. And more importantly, it offers a framework for understanding what you experienced that doesn't rely on supernatural explanations." James, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "I'm not sure it matters what we call it. Something connected Emma across time to us. Whether we attribute that to quantum physics or something else doesn't change what happened." They did too, as they discussed the implications. Sophia's assistant entered with a tablet. "Dr. Rivera, you need to see this. The algorithm found something else in the composite data." On the tablet was a clear image of Harriet Wells, sitting at an easel, painting the Thornton family portrait. Behind her stood Emma, not as she appeared in life, but as a translucent figure guiding Harriet's hand. "She was there," Eleanor whispered. "Somehow Emma was present during the painting's creation, which explains the extraordinary detail in the window," James added. "Harriet wasn't just painting from memory or imagination, she was being shown what to paint." The image seemed to challenge even Sophia's scientific framework, suggesting a collaboration that transcended death itself. Later that week, the team presented their findings at a private symposium attended by specialists in art history, digital forensics, and quantum physics. The reactions ranged from skepticism to fascination, but all agreed that the Thornton portrait represented a unique case study in how artifacts might preserve and transmit information across time. Dr. Lawrence Chen, a quantum physicist from MIT, suggested that the portrait might have functioned as a form of entangled media, where the emotional state of both artist and subject created quantum connections that persisted long after their deaths. "We know that observation affects quantum states," Dr. Chen explained. "Perhaps intense emotional experiences create more persistent entanglements, ones that can be accessed under specific conditions." For Eleanor, these scientific explanations provided a framework but didn't capture the human element of their discovery. The real story was of two people, Harriet and Emma, who had found a way to preserve truth against overwhelming odds. After the symposium, she visited the museum, where the portrait now hung as the centerpiece of the expanded exhibition. A steady stream of visitors moved past it, reading about Emma's fate and Harriet's ingenious testimony. As Eleanor watched, a young girl about Emma's age stood before the portrait, studying it intently. "Can you see her?" the girl asked when she noticed Eleanor watching. "See who?" Eleanor asked gently. "The girl in the window," the child replied matter-of-factly. "She's not scared anymore. She's happy someone found her." Before Eleanor could respond, the girl's mother called her away. Eleanor approached the portrait and examined the window carefully. It showed only what it should, a painted glass pane reflecting the sky. Yet as she turned to leave, Eleanor felt a profound sense of completion. Whatever energy had animated the portrait seemed finally at rest, its purpose fulfilled, its message delivered across the vast gulf of time. Emma had been found, Harriet's witness had been heard, and in the process they had revealed a truth about art itself, that it could serve as more than mere representation. In the right hands, with the right intent, it could become a bridge connecting past and present, the living and the dead, the silenced, and those who might finally hear their story. 6 months after the discovery at the Thornton farmhouse, Eleanor stood before an audience at the National Conference on Historical Preservation in Chicago. The case of the Thornton portrait had transformed her career, establishing her as an authority on using technology to reveal hidden histories within artifacts. What we discovered in Millfield wasn't just a 142-year-old crime, she explained to the packed auditorium. It was a deliberate act of historical preservation, an attempt by one woman to ensure that truth would survive despite the power structures aligned against it. On the screen behind her, images of the portrait alternated with photographs of the restoration process, the farmhouse excavation, and the scientific analysis that had followed. Harriet Wells couldn't have imagined digital spectral analysis or quantum entanglement theory, Eleanor continued. But she understood something fundamental about objects and their capacity to carry meaning through time. She created not just art, but a time capsule designed to speak when conditions were right. After her presentation, Eleanor was approached by representatives from museums and historical societies across the country, all interested in applying similar techniques to their own collections. The methodology developed for the Thornton portrait, combining art restoration, digital imaging, and forensic analysis, was being hailed as a new paradigm for historical investigation. Back in her hotel room that evening, Eleanor reviewed her notes for the next day's panel discussion when her phone rang. It was James, who had remained in Texas to oversee the continued research. "Elle, something's happened," he said, his voice tense with excitement. Sophia's team found another portrait by Harriet Wells. Where? Eleanor asked, immediately alert. In a private collection in Houston. A family portrait from 1885, 2 years after the Thornton painting. It has the same signature style and, this is the important part, it contains similar microscopic text hidden around architectural elements. What does it say? We're still decoding it, but the fragments we've translated suggest it documents another crime, possibly domestic violence that resulted in a woman's death. Sophia thinks Harriet Wells may have created a series of these witness portraits. The implications were staggering. If Harriet had created multiple testimonial works, there could be other historical injustices documented and preserved, waiting to be discovered through modern technology. I'm coming back tomorrow, Eleanor decided. This could change everything we thought we knew about Victorian-era documentation of crimes against women and children. Joe. When Eleanor returned to Texas, she found the lab buzzing with activity. The newly discovered portrait, showing the Whitaker family of Houston, had been temporarily acquired for analysis. Like the Thornton portrait, it appeared conventional at first glance, but under spectral imaging revealed hidden text and subtle anomalies around a doorway in the background. Harriet Wells moved to Houston after leaving Millfield, Sophia explained. Apparently, she established herself as a portrait painter for wealthy families. But these new findings suggest she continued her documentary work. She found a way to bear witness that couldn't be silenced, Eleanor said, examining the new portrait. These families commissioned her thinking they were getting simple family portraits, while she was actually creating evidence, James finished, evidence that would outlast all of them. Over the following months, their research expanded as 2 more Wells portraits were identified in collections across Texas. Each contained hidden text documenting domestic crimes that had gone unpunished. A wife's suspicious death ruled an accident, a servant's abuse covered up by a powerful employer. In each case, Harriet had encoded her observations in microscopic detail, creating a body of evidence that would remain dormant for over a century before technology could reveal it. The Millfield Museum expanded its exhibition to include digital displays of all 4 known Wells portraits, presenting them as the Witness Collection. Visitors from across the country came to see the paintings and learn about the artist who had developed such an extraordinary method of historical documentation. On the 1-year anniversary of their discovery at the farmhouse, Eleanor, James, and Sophia gathered with Martha Kendrick and other descendants of those involved in the original case. The museum had organized a special commemoration, including the unveiling of a new installation. A small garden behind the building dedicated to Emma Thornton and others whose stories had been preserved by Harriet Wells. At the center of the garden stood a bronze statue of a young girl writing in a diary with an inscription that read, "For those who kept record, and those who ensured the record would endure." As Eleanor watched visitors move through the garden, reading the plaques that told the stories of each victim documented in Wells' portraits, she reflected on how technology had finally fulfilled the artist's intention, allowing silenced voices to speak across time. She was ahead of her time in more ways than one, Martha commented, joining Eleanor by the statue. "I've been researching Harriet's life. Did you know she studied chemistry before becoming a governess? That might explain her understanding of pigments and how to encode information within them." "A scientist and an artist," Eleanor mused, "the perfect combination for what she needed to accomplish." Later that evening, as the museum closed, Eleanor took a final walk through the exhibition. The Thornton portrait, where their journey had begun, now hung alongside digital displays showing its hidden content and the story of its creation. As she stood before it, Eleanor noticed something she hadn't seen before, a small self-portrait of Harriet Wells, hidden in the reflection of a silver teapot painted in the foreground. The artist had included herself in the scene, a silent witness forever present with the family whose secrets she preserved. In that moment, Eleanor understood that they had uncovered more than just historical crimes. They had discovered a new understanding of art itself as a vehicle for justice across time. Harriet Wells had created not just paintings, but bridges between past and present, allowing truth to speak when those who knew it could no longer testify. The portrait that had once seemed haunted now appeared in a different light, not as a vessel for supernatural phenomena, but as a testament to human ingenuity and courage. A woman who could not find justice in her own time had found a way to project her testimony into the future, trusting that eventually someone would see what she had seen and hear what she could not say aloud. And in that trust, that belief in future witnesses, lay perhaps the most profound lesson of all, that truth, properly preserved, will eventually find its moment to be heard. As Eleanor turned to leave, she glanced back one last time at Emma's window in the portrait. For an instant, she thought she saw a reflection there, not of a ghost or spirit, but of herself, James, Sophia, and all the others who had helped uncover the truth. Witnesses recognizing a witness across the vast expanse of time, completing a circle that had begun with a governess's brush and a child's diary 142 years before. The portrait had done what Harriet Wells intended. It had spoken, and the world had listened.